Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Music Den. I'm your host, Armando Venditti. Hoping you guys are having a good day, and above all else, that you are looking after yourselves and one another. Ladies and gentlemen, before I get into the topic of yet another, what we hope to be a fantastic episode, I would like to welcome back to the channel, Mr. Jim Bricker. How's it going, Jim?
Doing okay, Armando. Thank you very much.
Yeah, good to have you back. And the ever prompt Mr. Ken Cheshire. How's it going, Ken?
This is going to be an interesting episode, the way it started. But I'm very glad I could make it finally.
Well, I'm very glad that you're here. Ladies and gentlemen, we want to welcome you to an episode of Cross-Eyed and Burning, a music guide to talking heads. Now, again, this was another idea of Jim's. We are going to be discussing the band, their music, pretty much their musical evolution over the years. All right. Now, I'm going to give you the introduction here on the band. They were formed in 1975 in Providence, Rhode Island. They went under the name, under other names, sorry, as the Artistics, the Heads, and Shrunken Heads. They have to date 8 studio albums and 2 live albums. And they consisted of David Byrne on lead vocals, guitars, keyboards, uh, various instruments, Jerry Harrison on guitars, keyboards, various instruments, Tina Weymouth on bass, backing vocals, also various instruments, and Chris Franz on drums, backing vocals, and also again various instruments. They were signed to Sire Records in North America. And just a bit of background for me. I I first became aware of them. I was telling Jim this story a few days ago where I heard them on the FM Chum FM 104.5 Chum FM. On a Sunday afternoon, I was 12 years old, and the song I heard was their take of Al Green's "Take Me to the River," a cover of that song. And I really didn't follow up on them that much. I know of the band, but Jim is our resident expert. So without further ado, yes, he freaked out over that description and that clarification in title. I will pass the virtual mic over to Jim and we will dive into the music of Talking Heads. Take it away, Jim.
Indeed. Thank you, Armando. Yeah, so like a lot of these episodes that kind of come up, we're kind of sitting around yakking about music, and something comes up where it's like, oh, Armando, you're not that familiar with Talking Heads? Okay, let's do an episode on it. And we've done similar with, John Zorn, Billy Joel. We're going to have one coming up on Elvis Costello. There's all kinds of little rabbit holes that we go into. So, yes, I will take the heat for this one. I also need to kind of pull the curtain back and just say, ladies and germs, at the time of this recording, I prepared for a completely different episode. However, being the consummate professional that I am, I'm just going to go ahead with this topic and just completely wing it. So if it seems like I'm talking off the top of my head, see what I did there? It's because I am.
Duly noted.
Duly
Continue.
noted. So, Ken, I'm praying for backup, brother. Throw me a lifeline if I'm flailing. Um,
And
so we are going to start with as usual, we put together a playlist, and this playlist was mine, and I decided to put the hits aside because figuring that Armando had, heard them at somewhere along the line, even though he hadn't like really connected with them. So we're not going to be talking about Take Me to the River. We're not going to be talking about Psycho Killer. We're not going to be talking about Burning Down the House, things like that. Um, we did do an episode several months back covering the Stop Making Sense movie, which I think, Armando, that was your first kind of proper introduction to talking heads writ large, right?
yes,
Okay. All right. So some of these songs that we'll talk about were in the Stop Making Sense movie, and we are going to talk about the Stop Making Sense soundtrack a little bit. With all that out of the way, yes, let's start at the beginning with Talking Heads 77. This is them at their most kind of nascent and in their like primordial form. This is the time where they're, playing at CBGBs and, small clubs like that around the New York scene around the same time as the Ramones and Patti Smith, television bands like that. And, they were really kind of cutting their teeth. And, the Talking Heads had developed this very uh kind of odd persona on stage where it was clearly there was something up with David Byrne because he was just all about, paranoia and neuroses and all these things. And yet they dressed in like Izods and blue jeans and, deck shoes. So, they had a look that completely belied the, not schizophrenia behind their lyrics, but it was a bit disjointed, part of their charm. So we're going to start with some of that paranoia here with two songs um, right off the bat. The first one that I selected for us and for Armando was "Don't Worry About the Government," which almost has this start that sounds like a mandolin before it just goes charging into this great keyboard line and drum pattern set up by Jerry Harrison and Chris Franz. Um, and again, don't worry about the government. That's just, some classic David Byrne paranoia right there. Just like, oh yeah, everything's fine. The government's your friend. They're here to help us. Um, and then pulled up is just this great kind of punk anthem that just starts charging out of the gate, and David going, his vocal kind of keeps climbing, as things get pulled up and up and up. And I think these two songs serve as a really good introduction to the Talking Heads about, the sound that they had, the environment they came up in, their lyrical content, and it does kind of set, I think, a pretty good ground floor for just kind of the dichotomy of the band they kind of evolved into with all the other people coming and joining in and all the different musical cultures that they went down the road to not appropriate but just learn from and absorb. Um, that's a lot of yakking. Armando, what do you think from listening? What do your notes say?
Well, I my notes say this is that I can tell there is a musical arc from the start of the like from the first couple of albums. The first one being also produced by Tony Bon Jovi, cousin of John Bon Jovi, by the way. Um, from the first album, Talking Head 77, to the very last album, there was a progression from what I'd call post-punk, new wave feel to more rhythmic, dance-oriented, um, ass-shaking material. Let's put it that way. And
There you
I had to say it.
Yeah,
You'd
it
think
was going to come up at some point, so you might as
you
well
would
get it
think
out of the
something
way.
was wrong with me, that I was ill if I didn't say ass shaking on one episode of these that we do, many of them. But there is a musical progression. You can hear it. From the production that they do, starting with, on the second album with Brian Eno,
Yep.
um, you know, because he's involved in the production as well. So I like what I'm hearing.
So it sounds like let me try to put words in your mouth. You like what you're hearing, but you recognize that it's not kind of anywhere near what it will eventually evolve into and something that you prefer.
Um, Very well put. Are you right? Yeah. In terms of,
Okay.
yeah. Um,
All right, that's fine. Well, why don't we kind of oh, go ahead.
No, no, no. I was just gonna say, very few artists have, say, like their first album that is what you consider to be perfect. You know, there are those artists that, they release an album, their first album, and you think, okay, this is good. This is something I can latch on to. It's usually about two or three albums in that you're like, okay, I understand what's going on here. Um,
Yeah.
but no, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Talking Heads is a good example of a band that kind of started in one place and continued to sort of grow and evolve to become something much different than when they started. Probably a lot like Dire Straits. I mean, certainly by the time they reached Love Over Gold, they had this more sort of broad cinematic canvas that they were working with than when they started more just on the, you know, kind of bluesier based, debut album back in 77, 78.
Hmm.
Um, Ken, any comments before I trip to the next Talking Heads record?
I I understand what y'all are saying about the overall arc, and I agree. However, there are plenty of um, common traits that they established in their first three albums that are still there in the last one.
Hmm.
Um, they're very heavily um, heavily rhythmic. It's like the
Oh
band
yeah.
sound is a lot more rhythmic and percussive than it is uh, chord structures and melodies.
Okay.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
I get the deer in the headlight look there, but
Ken's set is falling apart, ladies and gentlemen.
as I have to fix my light, yeah.
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 Um, but in the first three albums are my favorite. I'll be honest with you.
Hmm.
I think that's where they're at their rawest, and I think most interesting. I'll s- yeah, go ahead, and that'll give
Okay.
me something to add a little bit later.
Okay, so Jim, which album are we going to next? The second album?
Well, I was going to kind of talk about more songs about buildings and food, their second album, and then Fear of Music kind of together because
Okay.
it's the
Yeah.
first two of the Brian Eno trilogy, and while I think those two albums probably have more commonality than differences, so it kind of makes sense to sort of lump them together.
I
Um,
agree.
to the point that Ken was talking about them being highly rhythmic, you know, two of the four songs that I selected from these two albums really kind of stand out. Stay Hungry um, from the Buildings and Food record, and then Memories Can't Wait. Uh, both have this kind of urgency in how they start out and kind of go. Stay Hungry sounds kind of a bit more countryish, if you will, while Memories Can't Wait kind
Yeah.
of sounds more like punkish and raw, but they still have just kind of an urgency to them. Um, the the second song that I selected from Buildings and Food is almost unlike anything else on that record, and that's The Big Country, which is Burns' kind of lyrical ode to like saying, "Oh, gee, there's a whole lot about the United States than just like New York and California. There's a whole big country in the middle right there. So it's his little sardonic ode to the flyover states as we call them today. Um, and I think it's definitely a pointer towards what would become more fully um, available to them with like their last three albums in terms of Little Creatures and True Stories and Blind. Um, but the song that really, well, Take Me to the River aside and Life During Wartime aside, um, E Zimbra from Fear of Music is a song that's really like a lightning rod. That's a very clear guidepost to where they're going to going to where they will be going on their next record.
Yeah.
Uh, Crazy polyrhythms, some Robert Fripp doing backup guitars on that with that just naughty sort of guitar figure that's going on in the back. The vocals that really are not English and they're just complete nonsense, but they have this sort of African rhythm to it. It definitely points towards where they're going to go with Remain in Light. So with those four tracks, Armando, what's your kind of commentary on those, and how did you react to those in this guide to Talking Heads?
Uh, again, Izimbra is, again, to use the phrase ass shaking, it is very rhythmic and it stands out from the previous three. Um, but I'm liking what I'm hearing. I mean, uh,
Hmm.
I would dare say I could hear David Byrne's, I would say, influence over the band coming out at this point. Um,
Hmm.
because, we talked about him, we talked about how the band started out as four equal members, all contributing musical ideas. But then near the end of their run with the last few albums, it kind of, it turned into David Byrne and Talking Heads. You know what I mean? Where the other three, Weymouth and Franz and Harrison were sort of relegated to the background, which I would imagine pissed them off. But I can see that happening with Eisenbra right away. Like in that, if that makes any sense.
Hmm.
And I can hear Brian Eno's sort of influence of no idea is too precious not to share. Throw everything in the pot and just come up with something that is unique. Because to me, that's
Hmm.
what he brought to U2 in terms of their production and stuff. So I can almost hear that too. Does that
Hmm.
answer any questions Aaron, that you have? Um,
Um, yeah, I want to. Well, I'll just respond to that. I think that the songs the songs that I selected, if you pair them with their more famous brethren, um, of like Psycho Killer, Take Me to the River, Life During Wartime, they kind of present sort of a pretty darn good feel of what the rest of the album is like. So the idea being here is that if you like these songs that are here, and I'm assuming Armando, you're going to link the playlist to the video, right?
of course, I always
Cool.
do.
All right. Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
That if people like the songs that they hear in this list, and just going on good faith that they already know the aforementioned songs, that they'll kind of, like what they dig in once they open the whole kimono up and see what's really there. Um, Ken,
Kimono? Okay.
sure,
Um,
open the kimono. Why not?
Actually, I don't see um a lot of difference in the production between the first album and the second two.
Okay.
Um, because I think Ono is uh it's like they were in his wheelhouse or he was in their wheelhouse, whichever way you want to put it.
Brian
Um,
Hmm.
Eno.
so the
Brian Eno.
difference isn't to me isn't as large as like when he started with YouTube. That was a
Hmm.
big sound difference. This is not quite so much. But that's neither good or bad. So, Um, Izimbra is a good example. One of the characteristics of the band that always come to mind is that one of their stylistic elements is minimalism.
Hmm.
Not all of their songs would fall into that category, but a lot of them do. I'd say the majority of them do. Um, uh, I don't remember, but the vast majority of Izimbra is a good example of where there's just not much variation in the chord structure.
Right. Yeah.
And so, therefore, here again, more emphasis on rhythm and less on melody and song structure as far as the music is concerned. I mean, after all, they got a very strong rhythm section in the band, and that makes a lot
Oh,
of sense. And of course, later on, they would really embrace, the African rhythms and instrumentation or whatever. But that minimalism is an element that I feel that runs from the beginning to the very end. And for me, it's the results are kind of mixed. I think Izimbra is that is the opening track, right?
it is.
Yeah. So it's a very it definitely gets your attention, being the opening track to the album.
Yeah.
Right.
Um, it's very recognizable, it's very memorable. But personally, it leads too heavily into the minimalism for me. Um,
The
I'm
album
not
does,
a
or that
I'm,
track?
huh?
The
The
album or the
album leads
track?
into minimalism or Izimbra?
No, the when they as a band lean into that more minimalist formula, whatever the song is,
Hmm.
um, I find it a little bit less interesting. Like I say, I don't think I bought 77. I think Buildings and Food was my first Heads album. And then I went back and bought 77 and on from them. So um that this all was new. And of course, a lot of times when something is new, it's like, oh, okay. But after a while, it's like, okay. And later on, I can't remember what album it is right now, but we'll talk about it then. That I find much more variation in
Hmm.
their song structure. But still, there's a lot of those what I consider consistent characteristics.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, the first three albums are just gold as far as I'm concerned.
Okay.
I probably didn't answer any questions, but
Well, what you did is reminded me of a few other things to kind of talk about before we get into the next record, which, and Armando, you touched on this too, was their association with Brian Eno.
Hmm.
Now, Eno became aware of them from their initial release. In fact, on Eno's Before and After Science record from 1977, he has a song on there called King's Lead Hat. The title of that song is an anagram of the band name, Talking Heads, and the sound of that song is completely beholden to Talking Heads 77. So Eno was an early fan,
yeah.
and so he came in and produced Buildings and Food and Fear of Music before they went to the next album, which is the one that gets of the Talking Head discography. This is the one that gets masterpiece applied to it the most. Um, Before that album, David Byrne and Brian Eno went off to do their own little project, which resulted in the album called My Life in the Bush of Ghosts, which is a really, really interesting record that has a lot to do with uh, just sort of looped rhythms, found audio artifacts that were just recorded straight off the radio. And this could be anything from news things to you know hellfire and brimstone preachers to bits of music from other parts of the world. I mean, it's this really, really interesting album, and it's got some really killer grooves on it as well. So it's not all kind of audio concrete like the way Frank Zappa built things. It's got a lot of kind of talking heads isms in there, and given David Byrne, um, given his involvement and given as a producer, um, it's worth diving into, especially if someone is really taken by Fear of Music and the follow-on Monster album, the masterpiece Remain in Light. Uh, Now, Remain in Light is the album that's pretty much full on. Let me
Have
finish my sentence first.
okay,
What?
full
Okay,
on.
full on one chord songs where it's really just a groove and a riff. This album was really inspired by the music of Fela Kuti and the stuff that he was doing in Africa, with just this very charging, urgent, highly percussive and highly bass driven tracks. And this album, especially side one, is just dripping with that. And before getting into
Thank
that,
you.
Ken, you're welcome. Ken, you had your hand raised.
Well, I had one question about the previous album I wanted to ask, but you're already into this one, so keep going.
You can go back.
Okay,
You can go back.
we stopped the train. Let's go back, Ken.
Okay. On the playlist, you chose Memories Can't Wait.
Yes,
Why that one?
I think it had a one foot back into their roots, kind of the punkish roots, but yet there's something about Eno's production that makes it just seem all the more modern. It
Okay.
kind of like takes the paranoia and the charging rhythms that they had and just kind of push the dials up on it.
Okay. Thank
And
you.
plus there were other songs from that album that I wanted to do kind of later, represented in the live releases. So I it seemed like a fair choice at the time.
Because there are a few times going through, your choices, that it's like, hmm, I wonder why this particular one. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Again, the idea being that I wanted to sidestep the big songs that were known
I
to
got
kind of dig a little deeper.
it. I
So
got it.
that's why I chose that one.
Okay.
So, in the
Anyway.
spirit of digging deeper, um, from Remain in Light, I chose The Great Curve, which is the song that ends side one, that is just absolutely mind blowing to me. And then Listening Wind from deep into side two on those records. And I'm gonna guess, Armando, that
Mhm.
those two songs were quite a bit of audio whiplash, given the
For me,
what
yeah.
were happening in the first six tunes.
Hmm. For me, you go from one extreme to another, but that's fine. Th-
Any other comments about those songs?
Nope, you're doing fine. This is all
Oh, I'm
you.
this is all me. I'm doing fine. I'm looking for a lifeline, guys. Come
And I
on. Can't
bow
you
to
see me
you, my
reaching for it?
liege. You are doing wonderful. You got to understand too. For me,
Okay.
albums like Remain in Light, the the one track that really got my attention was Burning Down the House from like 83,
Yeah, it's from Speaking in Tongues. Yeah.
Speaking in
Okay.
Tongues. So until then, I really wasn't that well versed or versed at all in Talking Heads. So
hmm So Remain in Light is the album that has Once in a Lifetime on it, which is,
that I
same
know,
as it ever
yes,
was,
yes,
but I'm laying that out for the listeners and the viewers who may not be aware of that. So I'm setting a context.
yes, I understand.
Okay. We've got some glitchy audio video going on right now. I don't know if that's going to come across in the
It
video.
hasn't come across yet, so
Okay.
but
Um,
yeah, your audio is somewhat glitchy too, so I understand that.
Fair enough.
It's the
Um,
Max Headroom episode, ladies and gentlemen.
there we go.
With the talking
Um,
heads, all three of us. Go on.
hey, um, so so if people are familiar with Once in a Lifetime, they're going to be a little bit familiar with what's going on with the other songs on this, heavily into grooves and polyrhythms. The Great Curve is an amazing example of a song that's just built on you know one looped groove, it seems, but yet these layers of vocals that are in there, and the guitar work by Adrian Belew. Holy crap! He just takes that guitar into Hendrix-like places that Hendrix never thought of. I mean, it's just amazing what he is able to burn through on that song.
Hmm.
Um, Listening Wind is, dialed down in the intensity and the beats per minute, but again, it's got this sort of like mid-Eastern feel to it, both lyrically and musically. And again, Adrian Belew just kind of sets this beautiful musical table of sound and color and texture and you know counter melody to what's going on with the main lyrics and the melody there. It's it is a the whole album is a fantastic listen, but it's when they shipped this album out in 1980, it basically came with a cheat sheet saying, y'all have probably never heard of a lot of this stuff, but here's where this comes from, and it start listing, Fela Kuti and all these other things that were going on. And basically it provided the unaware listener with kind of the backdrop of what influenced this record. And if it sounded completely strange to them, then it's because they weren't familiar with what was going on with all this African music at the time. So when they released it, they knew it was something different. And if people aren't ready for it, I mean, this album just kind of hits you like a sledgehammer. Even just like the very first song, the first five notes, boo-doo-doo-doo, and then it just takes off on this groove
Hmm.
that, you got to like hold on to something because it's just
Yeah.
unrelenting.
Hmm.
um, which doesn't make it sound like it's a pleasant experience, but it really is.
Okay, I agree.
All right, fair enough. So the next album in their repertoire is their first live record called The Name of This Band is Talking Heads.
Hmm.
And from there, I selected three songs. The first one was just released as a single, and it's called Love Goes to a Building on Fire. And you wouldn't know the words goes to are in there, but it's indicated in science by the arrow. So that's what that means, goes to. So love goes to a building on fire. And it's very much in the vein of what they released in 77 and 78.
Yeah,
Um,
it is. It is. Yeah.
the other two songs from the album come from the Remain in Light tour, which is not too dissimilar from the famous Stop Making Sense tour,
Hmm.
but um, it was different in that it had two bass players and Adrian Belew, excuse me, was the stunt guitarist as opposed to Alex Weir. So the songs that I selected, "Drugs" and especially "Houses in Motion," really kind of highlight the incredible polyrhythms going on with that band and what they were capable of live. "Houses in Motion," especially with the two bass players, and again, Adrian's just guitar histrionics. Um, is just a fantastic listen. Um, when uh, the name of this band is was originally released, it was a double album, And when they did a re-release in 2004 on CD, they basically made it a quadruple album by using almost the maximum space allowed for CD1 and CD2. So it basically expanded what was a 40-minute album, um, you know, per disc to an 80-minute per disc album.
So
So
79 minutes per disc.
yep. Yeah. So you
Okay, I'm
got
Yeah.
looking that
big
up.
value for money
I'm
on
looking
that
that up.
release. Yeah, the whole second CD is from the Remain in Light tour, and it's just a barn burner. And again, one of those things that I kick myself for not having the foresight to go see back in the day. But so if you are acquainted with the original release of, the name of this band is, and you're like, meh, it's not that great. Tell you what, pick up the expanded CD version. And again, it's not like this insanely priced box set. You can get it for, 16.99 at your e-retailers out there. It is well worth every penny. I think there's like 34 songs on there.
I got to tell you just quickly, listening to what I've heard so far on the live album, I want to hear more.
Hmm.
So I will definitely be looking into a big surprise, ladies and gentlemen. I will be looking into it and making a purchase. Don't give me that look, Ken. I know that look on your face. It's like he's buying another one. Whoopee! I mean, that's the way it is.
I think Ken and I are going to set up our own affiliate program, and whatever we mention on air, if you go by, we want a cut of. Just
Yeah,
saying.
ladies and gentlemen, we're gonna start a GoFundMe page for myself because I'm in the poorhouse, right now, like doing all this stuff. So yeah, no, but it's true. It's a good album. I'd like to hear more. And if there's an expanded version, why not? I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, go for it.
And again, it's like I said, it's like 16.99 US. I think it's about 32 or 34 tunes, and those CDs are chock full to the brim. So you value for money, it's a banger.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
Yeah,
But
for
no,
and
me,
it,
I as far as their live albums, I prefer this one. I know that's sacrilege, but still.
well, I think I'm with you on that one, Ken. So I'm gonna be your brother in
Wow.
sacrilege, but we'll talk about that
Okay.
more later.
no. Keep
Um,
going.
well, we'll get to it when we get to it, my dear boy.
Ladies and
Um,
gentlemen, this show has gone off the rails, and I love it. Go on.
okay, fair enough. Any other comments about Remain in Light or the name of this band is?
I well, the only comment I can make, well, makes a big surprise me making a comment. I do remember Once in a Lifetime. I do remember that video coming out. I do remember the song, but in passing, not. I didn't connect the name of the song with the band that did Take Me to the River at the time. Like I did not, equate that kind of. I didn't make that connection. So
Okay.
yeah, no, and it's fine. I mean, and the name of this band is Talking Heads. I want to hear more. What I've heard so far, I want to hear more. And if I can get the expanded version, I'm a happy camper. Like that's pretty much it.
There you
So
go.
yeah, yeah.
Let's move on to their album that kind of blew open the doors for them, which is Speaking in Tongues, which was released in 1983, even though it
Three,
was recorded in
three.
82. This album came out in like the late spring, early summer. So I always associate this with the summer and beginning of college. I mostly associate it with the beginning of college for me because I was in the in I s- one of the majors I picked in college was a journalism major, and as I was hanging out in the newsroom of the Spartan Daily, San Jose State, um, it was a Monday, and a bunch of people came in, and they were just tripping over themselves with superlatives about having seen Talking Heads the night before, and saying it was like the greatest concert that they had ever seen and will probably ever see. And I remember kicking myself going, dang on it, I really should have gone to that show. But I was like, I just, seen a couple of concerts, earlier in the month and wanted to save some money and da da da. But boy, was I kicking myself in the backside, especially once I saw Stop Making Sense. But again, another story. Um, Speaking in Tongues is the record that has Burning Down the House on it. It also has, which was the immediate hit, it also has This Must Be the Place, Naive Melody, which kind of became, you know, probably one of the best known songs in the whole Talking Heads oeuvre, if that's the
Hmm.
right word, if I'm
Hmm.
saying that right. Um, and it's just a fantastic album that kind of takes what's started with Remain in Light with just a lot of polyrhythms and a lot of funk going on, but it made it a little more melodic. There's not just the same one chord jam that's going on for each of the songs, and so it's a lot more approachable. And I'm sorry, Armando, I'm going to steal your thunder. There's a whole ton of ass shakers on this record.
Buddy boy, you can steal as much thunder from me as you want. I mean, it's fine. I don't, it's not trademarked. Okay. So maybe I should to
uh,
get some money going, but that's
your
fine.
solos are your trademark, exactly.
There you go.
But yeah, making Flippy Floppy and Moon Rocks, uh, both from I think they're second songs from both side one and side two, if I'm not mistaken. Um, Again, figuring that everyone already knows Burning Down the House, I wanted to put a couple other cuts on there
Of
that,
course.
if people, knew them, they would say, okay, I know this, I know Burning Down the House. This seems like a no-brainer of a purchase.
Okay, I'm going to interject something really quickly. It's got to be said. Burning Down the House, the video for it was all over uh, music video shows. This is pretty much music. In the early, the burgeoning years of MTV, it was all over the place. You couldn't swing a cat and hit someone without, mentioning that video or talking about
Sure.
the song. And it was just quite unique with the video itself, like with the imaging on the, you know, the imaging of the faces on the road and all that kind of stuff. It made no sense, overall, but the video to a 13-year-old, but you know what? It had an impact. And by the way, Bonnie Raitt's version, forget about it. No, don't even worry. Stick with the original. Bonnie Raitt's version, nothing compared to the original. I'm sorry, forget that.
I didn't
Uh,
even know she did a version.
she did a version of it and it sucks. Sorry. But I'm not one to gossip, so you didn't hear that from me. It's just it's gonna be one of those episodes, guys. I'm sorry.
Seems
It's
that way.
Friday. But Burning Down the House, again, the video did make an impact and it was all over music video shows because it was just at the time where music video shows were coming up and video was just like you're in like the second or third year of music videos being used as a marketing tool full time to
Yep.
promote a band. So this video was all over the place on TV. So, but
By the way, this album was also released, um, remastered in 2006, I believe, on dual disc, which it also contains extended versions of several songs that were originally on the cassette, which is difficult to come by now.
Yep.
And
Well, I know
I
exactly what you're
think
talking
I
about.
think it's still available. I have some dual discs. I don't have that.
Hmm.
You have the what they call the brick box of all
Yeah.
the studio albums, but which is basically the same thing. But anyway,
okay, yeah, you could
sort
check
of.
eBay or Discogs for that.
And if anybody out there wants to loan me their time machine so I can go back in time and buy stock in Amazon .ca, I'd appreciate it. I'll definitely make it worth your while.
Okay, Junior Bezos, we'll do that for you.
Yes. Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But to the point you're saying about the extended lyrics, yeah, I remember the first time that I saw Stop Making Sense where they had the extra verse in Girlfriend is Better. I'm like, where is that from? Because it wasn't on the album and it wasn't on
Yeah.
the CD, but yeah, you're right, it was on the cassette.
Yeah, there's five extended versions on that. Five songs, extended versions. So yeah, it's a nice little deal.
Nice pop.
yeah.
Yeah.
My last comment is that if the reissue of Stop Making Sense had the Blu-ray or the DVD of the actual show included in the set, it would be perfect. But you know what?
Yes.
You just came up short. Sorry.
It
Um,
did. It did. In order to get, and let's move into the Stop Making Sense
Stop Making
release
Sense.
because it has its the reason that I don't hold it in as high regard to your comment earlier, Ken, about being sacrilege, is that, Stop Making Sense has never been released to me in a satisfactory form.
And what would make it
Um,
satisfactory to you, my dear boy?
it would be the original mix that came out in the VHS when they first released the VHS in the 87, somewhere around there. Um, and that's because it had the extra tracks of cities and big business and Izimbra, and it had, it was the sound, from the stage. It wasn't doctored up in the studio for for a release. Not doctored up as in like Kiss Alive doctored up,
Oh, heavens,
but
no.
doctored up enough. And
Nothing
every
was that dark
release
enough.
of Stop Making Sense since then has kind of suffered. And I think we talked about this in the episode where we talked about Stop Making Sense, where I'm probably the wrong person to talk about it because I have probably this near, unreasonable religious fervor about that video cassette and
Yeah.
the audio mix from it because I recorded the audio off that video cassette on a TDX or
Yeah.
TDK 90 cassette, and that followed me in my car throughout all of college. So again, that the audio from that lives rent free in my head, and
The
when there's
thing, the
something that
thing
changes in a
is,
mix,
the thing
you
is,
know,
Jim, is that you have a connection with Stop Making Sense that goes deeper than I would even say the fan, like a hardcore fan. That's part of your sonic DNA because you are
it
so
is.
connected with that concert that you connected me on a small extent, to a small extent with that concert. And I love you
Yeah.
for it. But I mean, yeah, I understand that. I understand that. And I mean that
I, I
seriously.
also want to just put out there that maybe my fixation on it borders on the unhealthy. Maybe.
Not you. Never you. Don't say
Just
that.
trying to be just trying to be fair.
Well, I tried. I was trying to be, I was trying to be kind about it, but okay, if you say so. I mean,
Well, Ken makes that mean face again about that. I don't want to make a comment about this.
Ken's like, get me out of this episode as quick as you can,
I know.
as painless, no pun intended, as
That's
possible.
okay. That's all
Yeah.
right.
Okay,
All right. So let's and anything else about Stop Making Sense?
I loved it. I loved it.
Now,
Um,
Okay, go ahead.
just quickly, I thank you again for introducing me to it. I remember when it came out. I will say again a word to record companies doing reissues, etc. Why wouldn't you release the original, you know, in its original format with all of the songs, not just nine, you morons. Anyways, I loved it. The fact that it starts with David Byrne coming on with just a boom box and, pretending he's got something he wants to play for everyone and and slowly the band come on stage. The the stagehands are putting up the rig for the show, and the band slowly come on together, um, one member at a time. I loved it. I thought it was musical theater at its most minimalist but most satisfactory. Because there wasn't a lot of flash pots going off or smoke bombs or strobe lights or like not a lot of effects. Mm,
Right.
it was as bare bones as you could get for a production for a concert show.
Hmm.
I loved it. I thought it was great.
Yeah.
You know,
Okay, so
Ken?
other than um, those songs being missing, you have the newest deluxe
yeah.
box set. What would you say about that? Other than what you already mentioned that's missing. Yes or no?
As in, like, yes, someone should own it.
Recommend it or
I would, if it came between like a recommendation of the movie as recently put out by A24 or the recent, 2 disc box set that also has the Blu-ray audio included as well, I would recommend the A24 version of the film,
okay.
especially the Blu-ray, because there's like 5 different versions on there,
Sure.
including the version of the VHS that lives so closely in my heart and in my head rent free.
And
Okay.
I would recommend to get it, if anyone out there that has the original 9 track version, if you want as close to the full show as possible, get this. Get
Yep.
this, get the reissue, please.
Okay.
Either
You would
one
all you
is
would
is definitely light years improvement from the original LP release from '84.
you would only be doing yourself a favor by doing so. Enough
Yep.
of a plug?
Enough of a plug.
All right.
I've only had the VHS as far as video is concerned. I never bought it on, DVD, much less the newer version. So
Well,
I'm not.
I tell you what, my good friend, the Blu-ray as put out by A24, which was the
Mhm.
studio that did the re-release of it um, in
Sure.
2024, the sonic and visual details are stunning. I mean, I have never before been able to see the fabric in David Byrne's big suit, but I can see that tweed fabric now, even on not the largest TV in the world. They really did a fantastic job with
Okay.
the video and the audio restoration.
Right.
And like I said, with the 4 or 5 different mixes on there, the
Hmm.
the the one from the VHS, I mean, now I have that on Blu-ray.
Hmm.
And again, it's that mix. So
Sure.
I'm a happy boy.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and just to pipe in here quickly, all I can say is thank God payday for me is Tuesday because I'm going to get a copy of the name of this band is Talking Heads. So I will get that copy definitely. Thank God again, payday is coming up. So
There we go. Timing is
Okay.
everything.
Yeah.
bloody right.
Uh let's move on because they actually have 3 other studio albums after this.
Please
The
do.
first one is called Little Creatures. Sorry, Armando, did I step on something you were saying?
No, I just said please do continue, my dear boy. You're doing wonderful.
Ah, all right. So, Little Creatures, which is very much a left turn from the, high octane funk of both Remain in Light and Speaking in Tongues. And it's, basically a country album. People know the song Road to Nowhere, and that's on this record.
Hmm.
The other minor hit was well, there were two, and she was, and then Stay Up Late.
Stay up late.
Little baby goes, you gotta love that. So the 2 songs I selected were again not the hits, but if you know those hits and you like these 2 songs, you're gonna feel good about what you get with the whole album. The Lady Don't Mind and Perfect World are, lower key in tempo, but they're just gorgeously recorded and performed. It's just really really nice. It's just not the get on your feet and dance Talking Heads that people were kind of expecting. And then the same goes for the next release, which was True Stories, uh, which was and not quite a soundtrack, but David Byrne wrote and directed this movie called True Stories. And in the film, um, John Goodman was in the movie. I don't remember anyone else at this off the top of my head who's in the movie at this point. Maybe Ken will do some research and bail me out while I'm talking. But basically, the Talking Heads album, True Stories, is the songs that were originally sung by the characters in the movie, but done by Talking Heads.
Got it.
And
Got it.
it's kind of, I'll call it like an updated. It's not pop. It's not country. It's not Latin, but there's elements of that kind of throughout. Um, I think the songs that were kind of popular as singles were, I can't remember right now. Um, but that being aside, the two songs that I selected, "Puzzle and Evidence" and "People Like Us," kind of lean towards the gospely side of the album. And "People Like
Okay.
Us," the country one, and "Puzzle and Evidence" is kind of your classic David Byrne, where you've got a gospel setting, that's kind of like questioning what people say as proof of God's existence. It's "Puzzle and Evidence."
Hmm.
So it's a really, really fun recording, and it's leans heavily into like the gospel choir, um, shout and preacher type of thing. James
Mhm.
Brown wasn't the preacher in that. I know he was in Blues Brothers. Um, any rem- any reminders, Ken, on who the preacher was in True Stories?
Um, John Ingle.
John Engel.
Yeah, I believe.
Okay, all right.
There weren't a whole, I mean, other than John Goodman, there weren't any really big stars in that. Um, Spalding Gray was in that, which only, you know, film buffs would probably recognize. Uh,
Hmm.
and then the other one that I recognized was Swoosie Kurtz.
Oh, Smoothie. Yep, yep.
I like
Yeah.
me some Swoozy.
Oh, Pop Staples was in there too.
From the Staples.
Maybe he was the preacher.
He was Mr. Tucker, I think.
Okay. Hmm.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I've seen it. I don't
All
remember
right.
much. I
Good to
just
know.
recognize the faces, that I recognize.
Yeah.
Good to know. Yeah.
It's a curio of a film. I mean, it's one of those things to kind of watch once to say, okay, I did that,
Yeah.
but it doesn't stay with you as like, a high mark of even art cinema of the late 80s.
Yeah. It's a niche film. And of these two, actually, I really liked Little Creatures when it came out. Like you
Hmm.
said, it was a departure from what was to be expected. Um, I took this, I had this on recorded this on the cassette, and that summer of '85 when it came out, I took it with me to a 6-week seminar um, for classical musicians, and um, just in the off times, just for something different than classical music, I would play this cassette. And so many of the other musicians there that would pass by and hear the boombox playing that really made an impact on them, to the point that when we all went back the following summer, there was at least five. I remember five people asking me, "Oh, did you bring the Talking Heads?" And I had completely forgotten about it,
Mm.
but it made that impression on them that they remembered it, a year later. So that might be a good entry point for some people, but
Sure.
It was interesting. It's one of my, it's probably my favorite Ladder album, just because it's a little something different,
Well,
but still has that, you know.
I think with Talking Heads, because of the musical arc that they have, there are different albums for people that like different types of music. Like if you like,
Sure.
punk or post-punk or new wave, you have Talking Heads 77. If you like the more rhythmic, ass shaking, yes, I said it again, tracks, you have Fear of Music, moving on. You want the more pop, dare I say, avant-garde, you've got Speaking in Tongues. So you've got different points of entry, different reference points for each era of the band over the time of their existence. So,
Mhm.
Yep.
but I'll shut up.
Sure.
Go ahead.
No, I think that's a very fair point, and I think that correlates back to what I was mentioning earlier about bringing up Dire Straits. There are people out there who probably love Brothers in Arms who would
Yeah.
listen to Dire Straits debut and go like, "What is this?"
What the
Not the
hell?
same
Yeah.
band.
I mean, personally, I would use Love and Gold as a reference entry point, but that's just Love over Gold. Sorry.
Yeah,
Um,
but I was just picking Brothers in Arms because it's just more well known. So
it's
yeah.
the yeah, it's these commercial success. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm. But for us musical snobabouts, yeah, I think we'd all pick Love Over Gold or Making Movies, frankly.
yeah. But you must continue, my dear boy. You're not done yet.
We must, because we only have one more album to go, and that is their final studio album, which was from 1988, called Blind. Um, which, at the time I was working at a record store and I got to see that there were three different covers. There was one for the LP, there was one for the CD long box, and there was one for the cassette. So it was all sort of variations on the theme of the monkey on the cover, but there were three different covers depending on which format or form factor that you purchased. Yes,
Isn't it called Naked?
yes, thank you.
Okay.
See, again, me without notes. That's my
Ladies
brother
and
Ken bailing me
gentlemen,
out.
Jim is human. He made a mistake.
Well, that's because I held back on the joke a few seconds ago. It's like, well, it's time to get naked. But
Oh, I wish you would have. Um,
yeah.
Well,
I
with
don't know.
this kind of a show that we're having, it fits right in there. Go on,
Maybe
However,
that's
you
Jim.
a
weren't far off because Blind is the opening track.
thank you. I knew
You're
blind worked
welcome.
in there somewhere, but yes, it's naked is the tune. And this is
Yeah.
an album that kind of harkens back more towards speaking in tongues, but it's got a more international flair to it. A
Yes.
lot of that comes from the fact that they recorded this in Paris,
The devil you
and there were
found.
musicians from all over the world
All
who
over the
participated.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, from a percussion standpoint, guitars, horn section. I mean, this album pretty much has it all. I
Yeah.
didn't put Blind on there or Mr. Jones, again, being that those were the hits at the time.
Yeah.
But again, if you listen to Nothing But Flowers, which got some pretty heavy radio airplay out here on the West Coast, um, and Cool Water, which has Johnny Marr on guitar,
Yep. Both of them.
awesome. It's yeah, it's I think it's kind of an undersung album, maybe underappreciated, uh, because it didn't make anywhere near a huge a splash as um, Speaking in Tongues or Remain in Light, and
Yeah.
it just lacked that um, earworm song that Talking Heads were capable of producing. But
Hmm.
it's a really, really solid record. I mean, Totally Nude is a great song. Mommy, Daddy, You and I, The Democratic Circus. There's a lot of good Big Daddy. I mean, it's
Yeah.
chock full of some really, really good tunes. And Ken, is this the album you were thinking of when you said that of their latter, there's one that you kind of prefer more because it's more melodically varied?
No,
Or
that
am I?
was the one I mentioned a while ago.
Oh, Little Creatures.
Little Creatures.
Okay, yeah.
Actually, I have not listened to this one enough. Um, because of when it came out, there was an awful lot going on in my life. And
Hmm.
so actually, I didn't own a copy of it until I bought that, that box set.
The Brick.
And I just haven't listened to it enough. But because one thing that really caught my attention was it was co-produced by Steve Lillywhite.
Yep, that'll do it.
Yeah,
So
That'll
is
that
bust them
there,
that
out of a
name
rut.
always gets my attention. Yeah.
Sure.
for us novices, guys, is there an actual, my poor bank account, is there an actual box set of Talking Heads albums that's available?
Yes. It's probably out of print, but it's colloquially it's called brick because it's a
Rick.
white brick that has all the studio albums in there. I don't recall if it has the live albums in
I
there.
don't think so. No,
Okay.
I don't
Bastards.
think so.
Bastards and bitches. Okay, I'll take care of it.
It is interesting though because I think the brick are the dual disc versions
Yes,
and they have extra tunes. I think each album is bolstered by um three or four different mixes or songs that never made it off the onto the album but were recorded at the time. Popsicle is one that a lot of Talking Heads fans know about that was done around the time of either Remain in Light or Speaking in Tongues. I think it might have appeared on the Sand and the Vaseline collection that came out in like 93 or 4, two disc.
Stand in the Vaseline. Okay, I don't want to know. All right. Enough said.
Sand and the Vaseline is a really good collection for people who are like, I don't know where to start.
yeah.
Boom.
Start there.
Okay.
Boom. Two discs, and again, it's probably out of print and been replaced by a single disc Best of Talking Heads, but it's really worth finding. It's
Check
well
out,
done.
ladies and gentlemen, check out eBay or check out Discogs. You'll probably find it there. Stand in the Vaseline. Yep.
Yeah. So to me, just to kind of round back to Naked, I think it's a fitting capstone on the Talking Heads discography. I mean, it doesn't scale the heights of the previous albums, but it comes pretty darn close. And I think it's a really, really good listen. And if you like to kind of dance around your room and play your music really loud, Naked holds up really, really well.
Well,
Um,
my question,
funky, yeah.
my question to you, Jim, was that was do you think they could have continued after Naked?
I think they could have, but I think it just ran its course. I think you kind of made a point earlier that much in the way Genesis in 1975 was Peter Gabriel and Genesis. At this
Which the
point,
other band members did not like. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
yeah, so very similar here. I mean, David Byrne just became because of the you know vision that he had. We'll call it that. He kind of became some of the de facto leader, even though the songs are pretty much. I think they're all collectively composed by Weymouth, Browns, Byrne, and Harrison.
Mhm.
Lyrically, you know, David gets the lead because I think he wrote all the lyrics.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Okay.
if they did get back together, who knows what they would have sounded like? I mean, David Byrne had his solo career. I mean, the first album after Talking Heads, Rie Momo, is a heavily Latin album, and that is a show I did see. And the material that they performed, like three or four Talking Head songs. Blind is either Blind or Mr. Jones. I don't remember which it was, but hearing that live with the horn section was just stunning. They did a version again with a whole horn section of Burning Down the House, which pretty much could have burnt down the entire house if it wasn't an outdoor theater, amphitheater that I saw it in. Um, but Byrne had his solo career. Jerry Harrison was doing some side stuff. Casual Gods had at least two albums. Tom Tom Club was an active concern. Um, but again, they never, on their own, they never did anything that kind of reached the heights of what Talking Heads did. And there was a lot of talk in the last year that they were going to do something, together again, some kind of reunion tour. A lot of buzz because of all the press that they did together promoting the anniversary release of the Stop Making Sense movie,
Yeah.
but never came to pass.
Do you think that here's my final question. Do you think that David Byrne would have the final say as to them doing a reunion or not?
Probably, but it's hard to say because Tina and Chris have very, very strong feelings about some of the things that went afoul. So even if David Byrne wanted to do it, Chris and Tina might say, no way. However, if Chris and Tina and Jerry came up and they said, we want to do, Talking Heads again, what do you say, David? And David says, no, then it's a no.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think it ran its course because we're talking about a 10-year period, slightly over 10-year period, and that's a very common um, length of time
Yep.
for bands.
I, for a big mouth like me, I'm kind of stumped right now. I I don't know. I think that well, I do know. I do agree with you. I think maybe he did run his course. I also know that egos are a very fragile thing. And you mentioned Genesis before. Um, I happen to know that, or remember reading, I should say, that when Peter Gabriel was coming up with Genesis, and the fact that he was mentioned in the papers, with the bat wings, like on the, on the head and all that, and the fox and the red dress, and had good gams, had good legs. But I'd have to say that they were upset that he was getting more attention than the rest of the band were at the time because they
Mhm.
looked at it as a collective. So if it was Burns getting more attention than Weymouth, Franz, and Harrison, I could see them say, okay, you know what, this is not what we signed up for. I can't do this.
Yeah.
Like it's got to be 50. It's got to be like an equal split, or we're not doing it.
Yeah, and it would make sense that, David is the one who's writing all the lyrics because he's the one who's got to sing it. So he's got to have um, I'll call it the emotional and relational investment in the words to kind of sell them. But certainly musically, it was, unless one of you guys know otherwise, I think it was pretty much an equal split between the four of them.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll give you another example. And forgive the Kiss reference, but when the band reunited in the late '90s, mid '90s for the reunion tour, uh, Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley were paid more money and than Ace Frehley and Peter Criss. And when the two went to when Frehley and Chris went to Stanley and Simmons asking them for equal amount, they said, no, you're not getting it. We refuse to give it to you because we're still in the band. You're just coming back in for a tour. That is a kick in the ass right then and there. So it, yeah, I don't agree with that at all. But I'm just wondering. You hear it before, you hear it all the time. You hear it and we'll end this quick. You hear it all the time with bands like with the Eagles. It was Glenn Fry that went to the management and said, you know what, we Henley and I deserve more money because if it wasn't for us, you know, the Eagles' name would not be in the spotlight because of our solo careers. I'm sorry, Glenn Fry's solo career, please. No, I'm a Don Henley fan. But that ego got in the way and it soured me towards him. May he rest in peace, but it soured me towards him in terms of his attitude. So I'm just saying egos are very fragile. in
Yep.
terms of what keeps a band going. Forgive me, ladies and gentlemen, for this diatribe. I'm sorry. But,
Well,
I'm just wondering if that would have been the case with Talking Heads. You know,
I seem to remember reading somewhere, and I don't know, I might have dreamed it that, and I don't remember which album it was,
go
but
on.
that there was real hard feelings with the band against David Byrne because they felt like they had been relegated to a backup band.
This is what
And
I'm
so
saying.
they had a powwow or whatever. I don't know. I can't say that they threatened to leave. I don't know.
Mhm.
But the result of that was is the next album they did, um they all four made a very strong effort to make it an actual collaborative band effort. You mentioned the Eagles. That's one of the first thing that comes to mind. Pink Floyd comes to mind too. You
Yep.
know,
Very much so.
Waters firing,
Right.
Right.
right? Yeah. And it's like, excuse me?
Yeah. Yeah. How dare you?
However, however, it backfired because then they hired him as just a touring member, and
For the
Wright
wall.
actually ended up making more money as a
I'm gonna
touring
end.
member than as an equal, paying member because none of the expenses came out of his cut.
Exactly. He
So
made more
that
money
so
than
it
they did.
backfired.
But I've also got to say too that Gilmore, who loved Wright dearly as a friend and as a musical companion, also said in interviews Richard Wright did not help his case any with regards to Roger Waters because he was not in a place mentally or
Right,
emotionally to be
right.
able to contribute music, and he
Sure.
wasn't
Sure.
strong enough to stand up to Roger Waters. So if I was Richard Wright, I would be pissed off myself that a friend of mine would back up, Waters instead of myself, but I'm not one to gossip, so
Sure,
you didn't hear that from
sure,
me.
sure.
But
Um,
to take it back to the topic,
Talking Heads, yes.
I do believe, Ken, what you're talking about is, they felt like a backing band on True Stories, and Naked was the album where they said, all right, let's
Okay,
get more collective.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah, yeah. All
I
right.
just it's been so long since I read it, so
Mic drop moment, ladies and gentlemen. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we want to wrap up this episode of Cross-Eyed and Burning. We want to thank you for joining us on this uh, music journey into Talking Heads. We
And ladies and gentlemen, if anyone out there happens to be cross-eyed and burning, I recommend immediate medical attention.
get to the doctor right away.
Yes,
911.
Yes,
please.
yes. Call 911, you get to the hospital quicker. Believe me, I know. Anyways, ladies and gentlemen,
And the next artist in this series is Elvis Costello.
And I'm prepared for that.
yes.
And I'm not leading it.
Yeah, that's my job.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, again, we want to thank you yet again for joining us on this episode of Cross-Eyed and Burning, a music journey into Talking Heads. I want to thank my two cohorts, Laurel and Hardy, otherwise known as Jim Bricker and Ken Cheshire, for joining me on this, what you would call a uh, fly by the seat of our pants episode. Okay.
Well done.
And
Yes.
we will, we want to get some opinions going in some comments. So please put down below in the comments your opinion on Talking Heads. What albums, what era of the band is your favorite? Which live album is your favorite? Because I'm diving into the name of this band is Talking Heads. I want to hear that album. I love Stop Making Sense, but I want to hear kind of like, I guess, the live backstory. What led up to Stop Making Sense in terms of them as a live act.
And
So
just to
please,
make
again,
everything we've said make more sense,
yes,
listen to the playlist in the info box down below.
exactly, exactly. What you're gonna
Excruciating hours were invested.
Yes, yes. And what you're going to hear,
Painstaking decisions were made.
what you're going to hear is a wonderful cross section of music over the years in terms of the arc of Talking Heads. So please check that out. And again, I was going to say we're going.
You want a Frank?
I want to
Hey,
thank. I want to thank. Edit. I want to thank Jim and Ken for joining me on this episode. So again, please click like and subscribe and hit the notification bell to keep yourselves on top of any new content we've got coming up. As Hardy said, we are coming up with our music guide to Elvis Costello. That's coming up next in the series. And we have more shows coming up. Bill Schuster is going to join us again coming up very soon on our top 5 albums of Miles Davis. That is going to be an ass burner of an episode. That is going to be a long one. Get some food, get some drink, get a blanket, get a pillow, lay back, and enjoy. All right. So we're going to be bringing these episodes to you as quickly as we humanly can. And we're going to have fun with it, damn it. So again, I want to thank Jim and Ken for this episode. It was great. Again, I will see you soon and have a good day. Take care of yourselves and one another. Bye for now.